Hi, I'm Herb Stevenson. This is Natural Passages, revealing the unmarked doors of life. Today I'd like to continue with the series that I've been doing, a little shorter, but something very pertinent to what's happening in today's environment that might be useful to you. As oddly as it may sound, I want to talk about internal authority versus external authority and how that's playing out in people's lives today. So internal authority basically and external authority comes to the terms of we're kind of like a divided self. And what that means is we're taught most of our life to obey external authority. What are the rules, the norms, how to be safe, and all those various things. And the problem is there comes a point that if we don't develop sufficient internal authority, that becomes the default way of creating a divided self. In other words, it's what creates that problem for us of feeling like, I don't even know who I am. Internal authority, though, is living within the presence of one's true self. Now, frequently, I've talked about this in the past. At about 40 to 50 actually, we've all heard people have midlife crisis. It's actually a midlife correction. It's that internal self, that part of us that is beckoning for being seen, to being heard, to be brought into the world, comes up and shakes us, and we have to decide, am I going to live with external authority, or am I going to start self-creating the life that I truly want, which means examining all the various aspects of myself. If I allow me a little bit of political commentary here, we're presently in a place where external authority, political, religious, etc., is trying to dictate how people think. And what's happening is this divide is are we going to allow ourselves to fall into that, or are we going to move forward into a more self-created process? So one of the ways that I like to say that is this is like the illusion of self-definition. External authority focuses on imposing social moral definitions into the commonly accepted behaviors. In other words, we're compliance with the imposed rules. Everybody learned that when they went to school, kindergarten on, until I finally realized life was going to be a lot easier if I started complying. But the problem with that is it creates a lack of self-definition. And that lack of self-definition means we subordinate ourselves to cultural, political, parental, organizational norms. Nothing wrong with that, but it has its place. So as a result, we have a weak ability to self-reflect and see beyond compliance. In other words, we don't have possibility thinking. So we measure ourselves in terms of external forms of approval, whether it be approval from other people, compliments, etc., all the way to toys such as assets, bank accounts, and promotions. All of that's part of life. I don't have a problem with it. The question is do you do that to the exception of who you are? So the weak sense of self basically means you live in a world where you're afraid of external authority, fear. You're confluent with the outer world. Whatever the outer world tells you you're supposed to be, you do. You're blind to options or choices. You're hopeless beyond idealizing a better life and take no action. And I want to rephrase that or restate it. We dream a lot, but we take no action. So in other words, we have an idealized world. And that's what creates a lot of frustration for people in their lives. And eventually, the final thing of a weak sense of self is we seek approval, which means we avoid rejection and reprisal by complying with what other people request of us. So a self-definition in today's environment, and many people are struggling with this, is having a clear sense of internal authority coupled with a clear relationship with external authority. I don't give away my power, my authority, my capacity to be who I am. Instead, I develop myself in a way that enables me to be relational to the external world because, let's face it, we have to go to work, we have to do certain things, we have to perform, and there's nothing wrong with any of those things. It's just, how do I do it and also maintain the integrity, or what I like to prefer to say is my sovereignty. So internal authority, I'm fully resourced, I have a strong sense of self-esteem, I often come from a place of possibility thinking. I have a sense of my right to act fully responsible for creating a personal sense of self. In other words, I accept I am responsible for that, and I engage life fully present to this moment. Now, over the course of the years, or this last year, we've been talking about presence. Presence is the capacity to be in the moment, not living by the Memorex, the recordings in our mind that deviates us. And those are all helpful because, I'm one of those who subscribes to teach your kids how to look both ways before crossing the street, and then one more time just before, because people drive a lot faster than they used to. All of those things are very helpful, but then the question comes down to, for us at this point, is how do I want to be in the world? How do I want to live my life? So that means have an internal relationship with external authority. So I use external authority to understand the pressures to conform without losing my sense of self. Understands external influences and how to use them for support in creating what is consistent with one's internal definition of self and one's sovereign authority. That last part I want to expand a little bit more. When I was younger, up to my 40s, I bought into the white picket fence story, which basically, if you get married, have children, have a nice home, have a nice car, get a good job, all of those are very, very important. But one of the things that was my advantage that I had was that supported me later. At the time I didn't realize is my father was always saying is go do as many things as you possibly can until you find out what you love. And when you find out what you love, and that's where you want to stop, because if you do what you love, it won't be work, and you'll continue to enjoy yourself, which is played out quite well. I'll be 74 this year, and I'm still working and enjoying every minute of it. So the thing about the idea of the internal relationship and understanding the pressures to conform, it's not that I do not, with my clients, do not support them, do not live within the confines of what they want. But what I don't do is kowtow to unreasonable expectations or various other things. I work within who I am, how I am, with what they need, and if it's a match, we work together. If it's not a match, if it's not something that I can work together with, I don't accept the work. So another way of saying this is one of the hardest things I had when I was younger. I don't work for a paycheck. I work because the work's fun, it's interesting, it's challenging. And that's allowed me to, as a result, people ask me, how do you do all these various things that you do? Because many of you know this. I've written several novels now, 16 novels. I've written a whole series of books in the past. I had to actually self-teach myself how to write. But it was because there was a love behind that, a labor of love, instead of working myself off just to make a paycheck. So when you think about internal authority, one of the ways to ask yourself, am I being true to myself? And if you're not, what would it take to give yourself permission to just try one thing each day that would support that? I often refer to people as the interesting thing is the PC monster gets a hold of us so closely every day, we don't think we can get up from our desk and go get a cup of coffee, or we don't think we can go for a walk, which is not true. Nothing is preventing us except us, because we've bought into the story of external authority is this is what a good person does. For me, I would rather have a person who is fully present to themselves working with me and supporting what I'm trying to do, and vice versa, than I would to have somebody who sits there and pounds the keyboard all day. So think about some of these things. Ask yourself, how do I support myself, my internal authority? How much of my life have I given away by complying with what other people tell me I absolutely have to do? And please understand, I'm not saying is this means this gives you an opportunity or permission to go back to being 5 years old and highly rebellious, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what would it take for you to create the life that you want? I'm Herb Stevenson. I appreciate your time. This is Natural Passages, Reveal the Unmarked Doors of Life, and have a good day. Thank you.